Good evening and greetings, victorious people. Welcome to everyone joining us tonight on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, and a special welcome to those who may be watching this broadcast on replay. I am Belinda Scott Pitts, proud president of the multi-award winning Suffolk Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and it is truly our honor to welcome you to our 2026 May Week celebration event. This year's theme, From Vision to Victory, A Legacy Continued, reminds us that when we invest in knowledge, empower our communities, and prepare for the future, we strengthen the legacy for generations to come. Tonight's webinar, Enhancing Your Financial Portfolio Strategies to Increase Wealth at Every Life Stage, is another example of our continued commitment to educating, uplifting, and equipping our community with resources that create lasting impact. We are grateful to our partners at First Genesis of Virginia and to our featured presenters, Danica Royster and Kendra Bullock, for sharing their expertise with us this evening. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us tonight. We encourage you to engage in the comments, share this live stream, and invite others to join this important conversation about building wealth and securing financial wellness at every stage of life. And now it is my pleasure to turn it over to our moderator for this evening, Trinity Woodson.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Trinity Woodson, and I have the pleasure of serving as your moderator for this evening's Financial Fortitude webinar. Thank you all for taking the time to join us tonight for what is sure to be an informative and empowering discussion. Before we begin, I'd like to share a few quick housekeeping reminders. Number one, questions may be submitted throughout the webinar using the chat feature on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and Instagram Live. And number two, we will reserve time at the end of this discussion for audience questions and follow-up. Tonight, we are excited to welcome representatives from First Genesis of Virginia. Our presenters this evening are Ms. Danica Royster and Ms. Kendra Bullock of First Genesis of Virginia. Danica Royster is a wealth consultant at First Genesis of Virginia, LLC, an independent Black-owned financial planning firm where she is dedicated to helping Black women and their families build wealth that brings peace, dignity, and legacy. With more than a decade of experience in retirement planning, wealth accumulation, educational funding, and insurance-based asset protection, she pairs technical expertise with a culturally competent, trauma-informed approach to financial wellness. A former Norfolk City Council member for Super Ward 7, Danica also served on Governor Abigail Spanberger's United for Virginia transition team and continues her advocacy throughout several leadership and advisory roles throughout the Hampton Roads community. She is a sought-after speaker who has led financial education webinars for chapters of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the National Council of Negro Women, and regional conferences throughout our communities. Danica's work is grounded in a simple belief. Black women don't need perfection before they begin. They need guidance that honors their reality and supports their growth. Joining her this evening is Kendra Bullock, a seasoned financial professional and client services advisor at First Genesis of Virginia, where she brings expertise in financial planning and taxation to serve her clients. Originally from Memphis, Tennessee, Kendra earned her bachelor's degree in finance from Middle Tennessee State University before pursuing both a master's degree in management and a master's in taxation and financial planning. In addition to holding Series 7 and 66 licenses, Kendra is licensed to sell life and health insurance and annuities in Virginia and Maryland. Her passion for continuous learning and helping others navigate financial planning has equipped her with a comprehensive understanding of financial principles and strategies that continue to benefit the clients and communities she serves. Please help me and join me in welcoming Ms. Danica Royster and Ms. Kendra Bullock. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Please give me pause as I just transition our screens over. Okay. Good evening, everyone. As mentioned before, my name is Danica Royster, and it's a pleasure to be back with the amazing award-winning chapter, Suffolk Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And we're excited to partner with them on their May Week activities and presenting with you all tonight the Enhancing Your Financial Portfolio presentation, strategies to increase wealth through every stage. So our agenda for tonight, we're going to start with laying the foundation, preservation and life transitions, legacy and enjoyment, and we'll discuss some next steps. And of course, as it was mentioned prior, we'll then transition into some Q&A from the audience. So where do we begin? Headlines. So over the course of the last 2 years, maybe even 3, a lot of headlines have appeared in the news. Over 300,000 Black women have lost their jobs in 3 months. This is not a drill. Student loan payments are back, and Black women are still the most impacted. New data shows unequal access to economic mobility for Black women, the vast wealth gap between Black and white women in the United States. Black women are falling behind in their wealth building journeys. Black women face barriers to building generational wealth, study reveals. So you might be sitting here thinking to yourself, like, Danica, how can these still be headlines when we have information such as Black women are the highest group of persons earning higher degrees, the next leading group of CEOs, as well as the advancements some of you all are already seeing in your own personal lives and even within the community. And one of the things that we've recognized with this is 2 things can be true at the same time. You can be succeeding in your career. However, due to either a lack of knowledge, being uninformed, or even having access to knowing what are some other ways that I can enhance my portfolio, that's wherein there lies a gap. So tonight we're going to start addressing some of the things that people can do at different stages of their lives to hopefully not contribute to these statistics, but also to position themselves for their future, as well as what they can now lean into the next generation to share with them about as well. So, as I mentioned before, we're going to start with laying the foundation, building habits, understanding money, and leveraging time. So I like to start off with this is because myself and Kendra, when we're engaging new clients or prospects, one of the things that when we're talking to them is about, what do you have? And what we find is oftentimes people need to get a little bit organized. Tax season has just ended. So I'm sure normally for a lot of people leading into the 15th, that's the time when they start pulling all their documents and getting everything together. Well, guess what? You shouldn't necessarily be preparing in advance of tax season. It's important to know what you have in advance. So one of the things I would tell anyone, depending on where you are, start collecting and getting an idea of what you have. So everything from investment statements. My favorite is employer benefits. By raise of hands or in the chat, you can acknowledge this. I always tell people we normally have some different types of persons who will come to us, especially for those who are start getting into their career or might have just gotten, as I say, their first real job. The employer benefit packet. So you have some persons who will say, I just signed up for all the free stuff because I don't want them taking any more stuff out of my check. Then you have some people who say, hey, I called my mom and asked her, hey, I know I'm supposed to be registering for some of these things during open enrollment. What am I supposed to do here? And then there's another group who will be like, Danica, I know that there's stuff there. I have no idea how it works. Well, this is something that's important to understand. Essentially, is there anything that you're going to need to essentially supplement, but also having a better understanding of what does my job provide? Another would be insurance policies. We'll talk about this a little bit further, but everything from your car insurance to understanding your health insurance, rentals insurance, homeowners, but also like life insurance, long-term care insurance, and disability income insurance. Having an idea of what those things are, how they work, and making sure that they're easily accessible. Why can that also be important? That leads into the next one. Estate and trust documents, making sure we have all of those. Recent tax returns, also your liabilities, and retirement accounts. These are all things that most persons probably have access to, but it'd be probably a really good idea to take a look and see, okay, let me put everything in one place so I can get an idea of what I have. So that way, if I'm going to be making plans for my future, it's important for me to have an idea of what I have currently in my present. So the next thing that we talk to clients about is knowing your numbers. So one of my favorite phrases is when I'm engaging with someone, I'll ask them, how are you positioned? And some people will say, I'm good. What does that mean, right? Because I'm good is essentially relative to who you're speaking to. So as we're getting organized, it'd be good to just kind of get some inventory of where do I stand? And the first place would probably be looking at what are my assets versus my liabilities. Now, some of you all may know this, but assets are the things that you own. So that would be the money in your bank accounts, investment, retirement portfolios, a vehicle if it's paid off, your home if it's paid off, and also money in the bank. Those are all would be defined as assets, the things that you own. Now, liabilities on the other side of that are the things that you owe. Danica, what could be an example of that? I will give you the number one for some of the persons, and you might be like, oh my goodness. Student loans resonate with anyone? Probably a lot of you. So that's something that you owe, right? Car notes, credit cards, lines of credit from the bank, personal loans, mentioned student loans. For some persons, if you got a new place, furniture. So these are all things that are liabilities. And one of the things that we're going to be supplying those, and if you put your information, like your email address in the chat, is essentially a worksheet that would be the Manage My Money worksheet. With that piece of document, you'll be able to actually list out your assets versus your liabilities. And why is this all important? Because it's as you're evaluating your entire financial portfolio, as I mentioned earlier, it's important to get an idea of where you stand. Ultimately, what does this lead into? Your net worth. And I know that that's normally a big conversation piece for people, or we even see it highlighted like this person's net worth is X amount. Well, guess what? You have your own personal net worth, and it's important to have an idea of where you stand, not just for the purpose of financial planning, but also in the future. Some persons, you might have gone through the home buying process and you're looking to make another big purchase. And these are the types of things, whomever, whether it be a bank or some type of loan company, they want to know, what do you have to be able to utilize as leverage? So as we move through, one of the conversations I talk about as relates to laying that foundation is saving. I know for some persons, it's like, okay, well, I know I'm supposed to save money. Well, do we know that we're supposed to save money? I always have the conversations with persons like preparing for the future, or you might have heard of it as a rainy day fund. Well, for those who were around in 2020, we recognize that a rainy day fund didn't cut it, because essentially some of us experienced Category 5 hurricane. You thought that, oh, this is only going to last a couple of weeks. I have some money set aside. And then lo and behold, what happened? We were, some people had transitions in their life that lasted months or even a year. So the biggest thing to ensure is, do I have adequate savings? And one of the first rules to money management that we talk to clients about is living within your means by spending less that you earn. As my mom used to tell me, not every paycheck, not every check that you make, you need to go spend it. Start putting some money aside. And for those who are up here saying, hey, that's me, Danica, don't call my number, I'm going to let you know you're not alone. This is a practice, and it takes time to essentially adapt new financial behaviors. But one way to look into getting into the habit of saving is consider paying yourself first. Consider it similar to when you get your paycheck. Like most people say, like, I know I made X amount, and then I get my check and they've taken all the deductions, the health insurance, all this out, and this is what I have now. Well, guess what? Something that you could incorporate is also, before the money hits your checking account, making sure that you've implemented maybe some type of auto saving so that it automatically goes to your savings account. You can't miss what you didn't see, right? So this is a good idea for some persons to consider implementing, especially when it's automated, if you don't necessarily maybe trust yourself to do it on your own. Set a fixed savings goal. Whether it's $25 a week or more, commit to saving a regular amount of money. If you don't already have a savings account, consider opening one. So we've often met with clients, and one of the things that they'll talk about, I'll ask them about bank accounts, and one account is serving the same purpose. Your emergency fund should not be the same fund as when my money that I'm saving to buy a home. Those should be two different types of accounts because they're serving two different purposes. We have a client, for example, where when we're talking to her and she's already implemented this, she has her checking, she has her emergency savings fund, and then she has her Beyonce savings because she is a big Beyonce stan, and she essentially has said, I will not be missing a tour. So I can't have this money in the same pot as if there's an emergency. So I need to be able to allocate and put that money to the side, which is a good thing to do. So consider also how you're diversifying your savings mechanisms. And we'll get into it a little bit later to talk about some of those vehicles that you could be utilizing for that. Another is explore investment opportunities. Once you've established a basic savings foundation, you can begin exploring other financial vehicles, such as bonds, stocks, and mutual funds. And I bring this up because sometimes I talk to persons and they're utilizing investment vehicles as their primary savings account. Not to say that that's something you cannot do, but one of the things that you want to be able to keep in mind is this savings account, particularly in the case for emergencies, you want it to be easily accessible and be able to be liquidated quickly. You don't want to have to trade and then wait for the money to move from your checking to your savings account. You know, it takes 10 plus business days if you move the money on Friday after 4 o'clock. Y'all know what I'm talking about. So we want to make sure that that money is easily accessible. Now, there's different types of savings vehicles to explore. So this is something that we often meet with persons and they'll ask, well, what should I use? So as I mentioned earlier, a traditional bank savings account. Those offer some with lower interest rates compared to other investments. They do provide easy access to your money, liquid, so that way you can get to it quickly. They're often FDIC insured. I believe the amount is up to $250,000. And as I mentioned earlier, they're ideal for liquidity and safety, but not necessarily an investment, or I should say a savings vehicle that you're looking to accumulate higher growth opportunities. Another account would be a money market. So that pays interest based on your account balance and current market interest rates. They typically offer higher interest rates than basic savings accounts, but sometimes they often require a minimum balance, which could range between $500, $1,000, or $5,000. Depending on your banking institution, that will vary. Theirs are also considered generally low risk, especially for emergency savings. And once again, these often sometimes can also be FDIC insured. And the last one that might also be pretty popular for several persons are certificates of deposits, or what we know as CDs. Those provide a fixed interest rate over a fixed time period. So you might see some persons who they will talk about, oh, I have a CD. So those can be sold in implements of like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You have to hold them for a particular period of time. The terms are longer. They usually are higher interest rates. But as I mentioned before, they're also low risk. I wouldn't necessarily say, hey, you should be expecting the same interest rates or return on your investment as you would in the open market. Their early withdrawal may incur penalties. So that's something to consider. Once again, going back to the why for this savings account. If this is something like it's an emergency, evaluating putting this money in a CD, is that really the best option that I should be exercising? Or is this funds that I can set aside because I don't have any general immediate needs for this? So once again, it's suitable for someone who's willing to sit some money over to the side. They do offer some higher returns, and you should consider your risk tolerance when evaluating these as well. And before I move on, one of the ones that I did not mention that I will is high yield savings accounts. So that is another ability to save. Those are generally liquid as well. They accumulate interest, normally higher rates than what you would get in your traditional savings accounts. But also what we're finding is even the rates on those can change periodically because they're not locked in. Myself included, I have gotten notices from my bank that, hey, your high yield savings account, we recently made an adjustment and the interest rate is no longer at X percent. It's been reduced to this amount. So that's just something to consider, because one of the questions persons will ask is it better for me to be in a traditional savings account, or should I consider a high yield savings account? But those are just some things to keep in mind. So as I alluded to before, why save? Emergency funds. So what are some emergencies that we talk about? Because for some persons, everything is an emergency. Well, I'm talking about, potentially a financial crisis that might occur. One of my favorites that happen maybe every year and a half, knock on wood, is something with the tire or the rock that hit my windshield on 64. And guess what? I got to pay for that now, where it's something that happened with my car. Or for maybe some of you all who are homeowners, it's things that come up because once you get a home, it seems like, hey, all the time, everything or something needs fixing and it's urgent. So these are the type of emergencies we're discussing with clients, and the recommended size of that is typically 3 to 6 months. I will tell you now that after going through the pandemic, most persons have adjusted like, maybe 3 months is a little bit too shallow. I need some deeper type of savings, and I need to consider maybe a 6 months. And we even have persons who have said, hey, my goal is to save up to a year, especially if you might be in a particular occupation where there's some volatility, some adjustments. People say, hey, I just need to be prepared for the what if. A good what if example is, for example, the article I mentioned earlier with the 300,000 plus Black women who lost their jobs. One of the questions is, hey, how many of them had emergency reserves? Or did they have other sources of income coming in? So that way they didn't have to worry about, hey, I got bills that are still coming in while I'm transitioning and looking for another job. Something that might hit a little bit harder and feel a little bit more real. Government shutdown. We know that where we are in Hampton Roads particularly, we have a lot of federal employees who are impacted when there's government shutdowns. Whether it's federal or it's DHS, Department of Defense, we've seen the whole gamut. And especially when they were going through the period of time where there's negotiations, guess what happens during that time? The bills are still coming, tuition is still due, mortgage is still due, and if you're renting, due on the 1st, right? So it's important when you are also evaluating my emergency savings to consider life circumstances that might be beyond your control, such as those as well. Now, something that's a little bit more fun. As I mentioned, opportunity fund should be something separate. So this is for some of the fun things, whether that's, hey, we have vacation coming up, or I know I take a vacation every year. Going back to the getting organized piece. Guess what? There's a holiday that sometimes a lot of people like to celebrate, and it happens every year. And you can plan for it. What is it? Your birthday. So it's not, oh my goodness, my birthday came up and I wish I had some money set to the side. If you know you're somebody who enjoys birthdays, or you have persons in your lives, or even your own children where it's like, I do a party for them every year, or graduation's coming up. That's now. So, planning for that, you have to be very aggressive over the next 2 weeks. But as I digress, these are things that also could be your opportunities, as well as, some of the things you're looking forward to. There's persons who are transitioning saying, hey, I don't want to rent anymore. I want to be able to start saving towards a down payment for a home. Or, hey, I've been driving the same car since I graduated from college. It is on its last leg, its last alternator, its last hubcap. It's time for me to transition to something that's going to be a little bit more sturdy, because Danica, I've been having to dip into that emergency fund for this car for 5 years. So I need something different to happen. Or, even some person who has hobbies. So the assets in this account, I would say consider putting them into something that's moderately liquid, especially if you've already measured out the time, like, hey, this is a long-term or midterm goal as it relates to being able to save for a home, or, college is down the road, those types of things. You can transition and consider, maybe I will use one of the other accounts like a CD, a money market, etc., versus a traditional savings. So I'm also getting a little lift in my balance from the investment versus it just being stagnant. So here with this slide, we have some examples as it relates to what are some of the opportunities, whether, as I mentioned, the girls' trip, going on a food and wine thing, or as I mentioned before, and yes, I'll say it, I'm a Beyonce stan, anticipation of Act 3, because if you know, you know. I know everybody's been speculating, so make sure we get our ducats in order so we're not over here pulling money I would put the other concert up here too, because I've seen some people post, oh, I'm about to dip into this and they just gonna take all my money this year. Let's not have that be a strategy. Let's plan for this and not necessarily say I'm getting ready to dip into my retirement account so I can go to a concert. Not the best advice I would give. Actually, not advice I would give at all. Highly do not recommend.
So we want to transition to where do I start? And for a lot of people, before I get into the slide, a lot of people like to start on social media. That's where we first start doing our research. What are the products or investment vehicles that may work for me or what's popular out there? And I want you all to tread lightly when you do that because when you are looking at these people that are, giving their recommendations, I want you all to be aware that a lot of these folks are not licensed. They are enthusiasts, financial enthusiasts, and may not be financial professionals. Now, I have seen folks out there that have a finance background. However, when you're licensed and in the field, there can only be so much that you can say. Like, you will not see me and Danica online recommending products because finances are not one size fits all. What works for me may not work for Danica, may not work for you or anybody else on this call. So what you want to do is make sure that you are identifying these different factors that so that you can kind of whittle down to a product that fits best for you and what you're trying to do in your life. So when I say where do you start, one of the first things that we want to acknowledge is our risk tolerance. How much risk are you willing to take? Some people may say, you know what, I liked what Danica just talked about. These savings accounts where I'm not getting a lot of risk. I put $1 in today. I want to see $1 tomorrow. So that means you're going to be more on the conservative end. Then you have folks that say, I am willing to take a little risk. And a lot of these folks are moderate. So you say, hey, I'm willing to put in that $1. And if it goes down a little bit, I'm okay with that.
I think we lost Kendra very briefly. I know we're having some technical connections, so I'm going to pick up where she left. So you have some people who are moderate, as she was mentioning, and then we have some people who are aggressive. Those are the persons who will say, "Hey, I don't mind a little volatility. You gotta what? Risk money to make money." I will tell you now that's one of the phrases I am not a fan of. And essentially, it's more important to say you can make money and be aligned with what's going to fit your risk tolerance. So when approaching investing, it's important to look at and consider how much risk am I willing to take? Another area where we start at is diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. So I always use this scenario of like an Easter basket. So when you go Easter egg hunting, you have well, we don't, maybe your kids do, right? You have all the different types of egg colors. That's how your portfolio should be. You shouldn't have just everything in your bank account, or as some persons even learned back in 2008 when we had the big recession, you shouldn't just say all of my savings for my retirement strategy is going to be just in my retirement account through my job. So it's important to consider, hey, what are some of the ways that I can diversify what I have in my portfolio? Whether it's mutual funds, stocks, bonds, ETFs, money markets. That's why it's important to outlay, once again, what is the goal, what is the strategy, and how is this going to best serve me as it relates to what are these investments supposed to do? As Kendra mentioned earlier, one of the things that we see often with financial enthusiasts and influencers is they'll tell people, you should buy this stock, you should do this. You should be diversifying. But once again, it's making sure that what you're diversifying within your portfolio aligns with your risk tolerance as well. Kendra, I see that you're back. Okay, something's going on now, so I'm going to continue. One of the other pieces that we look at when you're looking at where do I start, and I kind of leaned into this a little bit earlier, is what is your investment objective? So for example, is this the account that you want to be using for an emergency and you have it in something that has a high level of volatility, most persons will say no. A lot of people, especially when we're talking about some of the things that you might be saving for, they're considering like, I need to know at a minimum what I put in there, I'll be able to access. I'm not into the fact that the market's going up and it's going down, it's going up and it's going down, because I don't have that much time, whether that be looking into retirement, whether you're looking at saving for your child's college, etc., home buying. It's important to strictly outline, why am I investing and what's the opportunities here, and making sure that they align with what my final objectives are. And the last point I would talk on is, once again, the time horizon. When are the funds going to be needed? For some persons, it's, hey, I need this money like tomorrow. So once again, maybe you should be considering something liquid. But if it's something, for example, like, hey, I'm early stages, I'm working in my career now, I have some time until retirement, and I want something as an alternative outside of my job and my 401k, 403b, TSP. What should I be considering with that? And knowing I'm not going to touch that money for a while. Because as I mentioned earlier, some of these investment accounts, they have penalties with them if you go and access them early, like the CD, or like we'll talk about later, retirement accounts. So it's important to consider, what is the purpose and what is the goal? So where do I start as a summary? Risk tolerance, how much risk am I willing to take? Diversification, making sure I'm not putting everything in one basket. Investment objective, what is the goal? What is the purpose? And of course, the last one, time horizon. When are the funds needed?
All right, I'm back in action. Sorry about that, y'all. So, and that's the great part of being a duo. I can lean on Danica if something crazy happens on my end. So what we'll do is go into the types of investments. So as I was saying earlier, there is a range of when it comes to risk tolerance. So you can fall between conservative or you can be aggressive. So I have some examples here of products that could be a good fit for you. So when you're conservative, as Anika mentioned earlier, you can do a high yield savings account, right? So your money is safe, you are able to have access to it, and you get some return for putting your money into this type of savings account. And of course, this is ideal for those emergencies or something that is short term that you're looking to save money for. Now, if you're moderate, which means you are willing to take on a little bit more risk than if you're conservative, you might do something like a balanced mutual fund. So, with a mutual fund, I like to use an analogy to kind of explain what that is. So, most people are really familiar with an individual stock. So, that may be your Walmart, your Target, the Microsoft, and so on. But with a mutual fund, it is one whole product, and you can look at it as like a pie. So you have this one whole pie, but once you slice it, there are many slices that can be made into this pie. And a slice of the pie would be a representative of a company. So when you have this whole mutual fund pie, you can have your Walmart, Target, Unilever, Google, Apple, and so on, all in this one pie. So that means you have the ability to invest in multiple companies in this one investment vehicle. So instead of saying, hey, I'm going to invest in, I use Target, right? We all used to love Target, and it was booming. However, what happened, maybe last year, the beginning of the year, Target decided to take a different direction. And now a lot of people divested from, going into the store, buying their products. So that means, right, the stock went down. However, if you had a mutual fund and Target just so happened to be in that mutual fund, you won't be hit as hard by the drop in that stock because you have other stock companies representing like a Walmart or an Amazon that's also in this mutual fund that will offset the loss that you might have seen in the drop in the Target stock. So with a mutual fund, right, it offers the diversification that I just mentioned. There is still some risk, right, because some companies can still have some loss, but because we have because we're being diverse, then you will see that it'll offset those losses with any gains that may occur in different products. And also with the mutual fund, when you take more risk, there is more return. They say more risk for more rewards, right? So the more risk you take, the more rewards that you can potentially achieve. We're not going to make any guarantees, right? Because we never know what the market is doing. But usually, when you take more risk, there's more reward with it. So that means you'll get a little bit more return than what you would see in a savings account. Lastly, we talk about aggressive. So just like that example that I just told you about with Target, where we saw that, Target was riding high a couple of years ago, but now not so much because things have changed. I like to say it takes one scandal for the trajectory of a company to change overnight, right? So that's high risk. If I put all of my money into Target, I believe it was down 30%. So now I've lost $30 of my $100 and now I'm down to 70. So you don't want to experience that unless you're in it for the long haul and you're willing to take on that risk, because you never know. Target might make amends with us, with the Black women, and we might start going back to that store. So until then, they're going to continue to see a decline in that stock. So when you're thinking about these individual stocks, because a lot of people tell you, put your money in Amazon, put your money in Apple, but you never know what direction that one stock may be. And you don't want to take that hit by just putting your money into one thing. Another investment that people have been bringing up to us is the cryptocurrency, the Bitcoins, and you talk about the blockchains, and a lot of people hear about the really high gains that you get out of that, but no one ever talks about how volatile cryptocurrency is. It goes really high up and then it crashes down, and it does that all the time. So I like to say it's like a roller coaster. If you're someone that's willing to go up and handle being as high as you can go, make sure you're able to handle, and you can, I won't say enjoy, but you can handle the drop that may come with an investment like an individual stock in a cryptocurrency. So with it, when you're aggressive, you're chasing those high returns, right? And with them being so aggressive, there's higher volatility. So I'm going to say that term that I used earlier. When you have high risk, there's higher reward. So when you're aggressive, you're looking for those rewards no matter what. You're willing to take losses because you're looking to get those high gains. Next slide. And so I wanted to give an example of the cryptocurrency volatility, because a lot of people, even older folks, ask us about cryptocurrency. And so I want to give you a snapshot of what it looks like. First thing to note with cryptocurrency, it trades 24/7. On the regular market, when you talk about like the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, those trade Monday through Friday from like 8 to 4:30. This doesn't happen with cryptocurrency. It's trading Sunday to Sunday, all the time, from 12 a.m. to 12 a.m. the next day. So what I want to show you on this screen, it shows September 22nd of 2025 at 8 p.m. It was up almost 60%. And that's something that people really like to see, right? You want to see your money up 60%. However, just a few days later, on a Sunday, September 28th, you see that it dropped 40%. And I don't even think that's the lowest that it went that day. So, like I said, if you choose to be aggressive, you have to be sure that you are willing to, not only when you're riding high, be able to handle the heavy drops that occur when you deal with volatile assets. And so when we talk about investing, I want to give you a bigger picture, kind of tell the story and the feeling of when you are investing in the market. This is a chart that starts in 1926. And this is basically telling a story of if you were to invest $1,000, what it would look like in 2022. So if you started with 1,000 in 1926, you would be at over $10 million in September of 2022. So what does that mean? Why is that important? Part of this chart, the yellow bars represent recessions, right? We've been here, depending on your age, you've seen a lot. And you also, it notes different types of events that have happened, right? Danica has talked about COVID. She brought that up. We've had wars. We're dealing with something right now that is affecting the market, right? With Iran. You also have the Gulf War, the Depression. It seems like every other day is something going on, right? Gas, groceries. Those types of things affect the market. However, with all of these events that have taken place in the country, there is one constant that you see. And that means overall, the market has gone up. So you see, it is doing these little ups and downs in small increments, but it is trending upwards. So what we're trying to display with this chart is, although there is a lot of things that happen within the world that will affect the market, if you stay committed and you build that muscle in investing and you find the appropriate products for you and what you're trying to do in your life, once you keep that money in the market, over time, it will grow. Despite what's going on, the things that you see, .com bubbles and all those different changes, if you keep your money invested over a long period of time, you will see the growth. Next slide.
And what I might add is like one of the things that this slide makes me think of is a phrase my grandmother used. She'd be like, keep on living. There's always going to be life that is always happening. And we've engaged with persons who say, I want to invest, but I'm just waiting for the right moment. I'm telling you now, life is always going to be lifing, whether it's internally or externally. And as Kendra had mentioned before, it's not about life happening. It's also about where was I positioned when life happened. Going back to that risk tolerance, are you conservative, moderate, or aggressive? What was the objective? All of those things play a role because as you see, from 1926 all the way up into 2026 now, life be lifing. But there's still opportunities to not get emotional and stay focused to the goal of what the investment is supposed to do.
And so these next couple of slides will speak to when you invest for a long period of time. Excuse me. So when you invest money, what you're looking for is the interest, the returns that come with your investments. And when you keep your money in for a long period of time, that interest continues to grow. And it's something called compounding, right? So we're building on what we invest, plus we want to add on that interest. So as you see in this chart, if someone started at 65 with at their retirement age, over time, it will grow. Next slide. And so in the previous slide, we talked about at 65, but we want to speak to younger folks because people don't think about retirement when you're 19, 20 years old. I know I wasn't. And even now at my age, I'm in my 30s, retirement still feels a little bit far away. However, at this age, I know how time flies. I was 20, I feel like 2 weeks ago, and now I'm almost 40. So when you start saving early, that gives you a longer runway to experience that interest compounding that will allow you to give you a longer runway for your money to grow. So if someone, and we in the example, we have Jane at 25, she started at the age of 25, and by the time she gets to 65, she's over $1.6 million. But if we jump down to Chris, who starts at 55, he only gets to not even $150,000. So what we want to stress is it's never too early to start saving. A lot of people think, oh, I'm 24 years. Who cares? I'm going to live my life. I'm going to go see Chris Brown and Usher and Beyonce and whoever else going to be on tour. Do that, but also make sure that you're investing in your future because a lot of people, and we see it, me and you can see it every day. There are a lot of folks that are hitting 65 and they have to continue to work. Or there are a lot of people that say, when we ask them about retirement, I don't think I can retire. That's not something that's feasible or realistic to me. So the earlier that you start, that really sets you up to be able to kind of live the life that you want to live in your later years. Next slide. So when should you start saving? I just gave you the spiel. Start as early. Now, I know a lot of people, especially in kind of in this hustle era age that we're in, where folks are trying to be entrepreneurs, or you have to work 2 or 3 part-time jobs, so your job may not offer a retirement account. It doesn't matter where you're at, just start. And if you look at this chart, it basically is showing that Black folks are starting later in life, right? With saving for retirement. We are behind in a lot of categories. And it's because we're in the hustle and bustle of life, but we're not even realizing it, which is not necessarily your fault, right? There are a lot of systems in place that prevent us from being able to, one, pass down the wealth, being able to put back at least a match from my employer, right? There are hurdles. But even though there are hurdles, doesn't mean that means to not participate at all. We have to figure it out. That's what we're Black women. I know we're trying to get the strong persona off of us, but one thing that we do and will always do is figure it out and make it happen. So this is what we're trying to stress for folks now, because yes, we have a lot of Black women that have lost their job. However, that doesn't mean lay down and die. We're going to give and figure it out and start putting things in place so that we can be able to not only live a financial free or debt free life, we are able to give something back to our family and the generations that are coming after us. So I'm going to continue to knock you over the head with this retirement planning. Now, for a lot of us that have full-time jobs, you are offered some type of retirement account, whether it's a TSP, 401k, 403b, 457. There is something that you can participate in to put money aside for retirement. Number one, participate in putting money aside into that retirement account. Like Danique had mentioned earlier, a lot of people like to choose options that are free and don't want to participate because you don't want your check to decrease because you're making these contributions. That's the first step, is actually choosing to contribute to your retirement account. Secondly, there's going to be an employer match. We've seen it's a range from like 3% to 6, 7, 8%. Make sure you are at least doing the employer match. That is important because when you have the employer match, you don't have to do anything extra to get that money. You're not having to work overtime. You don't have to participate in the work potluck. It is just something that you get because you chose, because your employer has to do that. Now, we probably have to update these numbers, but the contribution limit, I believe, is 24,000 for 2026. And the catch up for folks that are older than 50, it's 8,000. Now, I know you're like, Kendra, I cannot contribute up to now $24,000. That is okay. That's why we're saying at least do the match. We're not asking you to go destitute now to save for later, but we want you to at least do the employer match. As I mentioned earlier, there are folks that may be in a role where you do not have an employer or they don't offer an employer plan. What are your options? You can still save for your retirement. There are different options out there. So one is a traditional IRA. There aren't any restrictions or anything to opening a traditional IRA. And I believe the contribution limit now is 7,500. And if you're over 50, you can do that 8,500 contribution. Now, if you are someone that's an entrepreneur, you have your own business, there are different options for you. You can do a individual 401k and you have a contribution limit of $70,000. You also, if you are an entrepreneur and you have staff, you have different options as well. It's something called a SEP IRA and a simple IRA. These are two different types. And so with the SEP, you can contribute a lesser of $25,000, 25%, or up to $70,000. And for a simple, you can contribute up to $16,500. Now, I will say this, I just gave you several different types of IRAs and they have different contribution limits. What you should know is you have to figure out which IRA is appropriate for you and gives you the best tax benefits when it comes to choosing if you are an entrepreneur and if you are a boss that has employees. Next slide. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And so, as I wrap up this section, there are principles that have stood the test of time. So, I talked about, folks, if you're investing back in 1926, those principles worked then and they will work now, even with the changing of technology. Number one, recognize that the issues that worry investors today aren't new, right? We've been fighting with Iran for how long? That came up back 20 years ago and probably 40 years ago and so on, right? Dealing with gas prices, I remember we were dealing with that when I was in college. So these issues are not new. If anything, and sadly, it's just building our muscle to know how to deal with it in the next 10 to 20 years. Next is stay focused on the bigger picture. You have your goals, and if you have them defined and you know exactly what you want to do and you have a plan to meet those goals, stay focused on that big picture. It's a lot of things that can get you sidetracked, right? We want to go have to the brunches and we want to travel. But some people, you have those goals. You want a house, you want to get a new car, you want to send your kids to college. Make sure that you are staying focused and being disciplined about saving. Next, don't let your emotions drive your decisions. A lot of times, of course, people don't start investing because they simply don't know. They're not aware, which is okay, right? We always have a starting point. But another emotion is fear. You don't want to lose your money, right? We hear the horror stories. We've heard them time and time again from these big corporations or different types of investors that do Ponzi schemes. We hear those stories a lot. However, if you stay vigilant and at least learning some of the jargon that should be on here too, making sure you're learning kind of the lingo that is used in the financial field, and make sure you vet people that you're talking to, then you can gain your confidence to be able to put your foot in the water, dip your toe a little bit in the water of investing. Next is, like I mentioned earlier, understanding your risk tolerance. Make sure you stay invested, right? If you keep your money in there, it allows that money to grow over time. If you keep pulling it out and putting it in, that's only going to be to your detriment. Next, being diversified. So we don't want to just invest in one stock. We also don't want to just invest in something, the new hot product that we saw on TikTok. We actually want to make sure we're diversifying so that when something may take a turn, we're not going to be affected or impacted so heavily. And lastly, work closely with a trusted financial professional. Now, there are two people on this webinar that you could talk to, but we are not the only ones. However, it is important, as I mentioned before I dropped off the call, that you are making sure that you are talking to people that are not just financial enthusiasts, but you want to talk to people that are licensed and have a couple of letters behind their name. Next slide.
Okay, so now we're going to transition to preservation and life transitions, preparing for retirement and protection strategies. So, this is life transition. It's time to drive a grown-up car. I'm ready to stop paying rent. Me becomes we, or we becomes me. That's a reality too. I have a baby, or two, or three, or I sat down and I recognize employee benefits aren't enough. So as you're elevating in your career and transitioning, your life is also transitioning with some of these things. So it's important that as your life is transitioning, you're also taking account to what are some of the things in my finances that need to be reviewed and transitioned as well. So one of the things and hot topics, and yes, it's still a hot topic, is life insurance. And I know some people are probably like, oh, of course they're going to talk about life insurance. I promise you, I would love to get to a date and time where I no longer have to have this conversation. However, it is something that is still occurring within our communities. And oftentimes, I will say to no fault of our own, life just happens. And most recently, me and Kendra even received a message from someone as it relates to, hey, I'm seeking coverage, but they're in a position essentially where they're uninsurable. How did that arrive? Well, one of the things I'll tell people, and the first thing we'll get is a face palm or the hand to the face of, oh, I don't want to talk about, I have it through my job. I have it through my job. I have it through my job. That's great. Well, remember I said reviewing those employer benefits are important? For some employers, you only have that coverage through your job that they pay for while you still work there. If you retire, get fired, or quit, depending on where you work, that policy does not go with you. And if it does, sometimes, depending on the employer or the company, they have something called age bands. And particularly, we see this with a lot of federal employees as it relates, and even some service members through either FEGLI or SEGLI or VGLI. There's something called age bands. Well, yes, that coverage that you had, you can keep it and you'll be paying this amount for this period of time. But then when you hit key ages like 50 to 55, it's going to change again. 55 to 60 is going to change again. And as Kendra was mentioning earlier, talking about retirement planning, most persons, when you're now on a fixed income, because the bucket, this constant stream of income has stopped. This is now the money I have to live on for the rest of my life. And most people want some stability. They don't want a whole bunch of bills that are going to be fluctuating every 5 years. So I digress. But what I will say going back to this is what's important is making sure, A, that you have the coverage. Now, one of the things that I love is that once in a blue moon, me and Kendra will get a call and someone will say, hey, I know I need some insurance. What's the average amount or average cost? Let me tell you, as she mentioned earlier, life insurance is not one size fits all, and there is no average. People's needs differ. So for example, if you're like, oh, well, what's the average amount someone pays? That's not even something to accurately ask about, because all of this should be based off of need. So one thing I will say is what we found is most often people are inaccurately insured, because when we're having conversations with them and they tell me, oh, I have coverage, I'll ask them a question. Well, how did you arrive at the amount of coverage that you have? And most people say, I don't know. No formal calculation was done. I just met with somebody and they, based off of how much this was, I was like, all right, that's enough. Well, that's why it's important to sit down with Kendra, as mentioned earlier, a professional to really evaluate what is the purpose of this insurance and what is it going to essentially serve for in the event that there's a premature death. I'll go back to, once again, inaccurately insured. Sometimes, and I know that's none of you all on this call, but every once in a while we'll be at a seminar, webinar, workshop, and someone in the audience will say, oh, well, you know, I'm not going to get that much because I'm not trying to make anybody rich. What are you talking about? No one left me nothing, so I'm not leaving anybody anything. That's a terrible mindset to have, especially when we're having conversations about breaking cycles and increasing generational wealth within our own circumstance. Life insurance is still the only gift that's transferable where there's no tax repercussions from it. And as I mentioned before, the amount of insurance to buy depends on who you want to protect financially and for how long. I'll give a very quick example. We had a client several years ago whose wife passed away near Mother's Day from breast cancer. Guess what happened? She, in advance of, just planning her and her husband for their future and their children, she had insurance through her job, but she also had insurance that she got independently. Now, never would have thought that after, 3 years of having this coverage in place that she would have passed on. But guess what that created for her family? Because they had 3 kids. Dad, who worked essentially like shift jobs, he was able to now overnight, because that's what happened, became a basketball AAU dad, PTA dad. He recognized the fact that, oh my goodness, we got to travel here, go there, get them ready for school, all the stuff that I know some of y'all are like, oh, this is the stuff we do on the regular. But guess what? This was an adjustment. And most importantly for him and his children is, I want to be there for my kids. And I don't want to essentially work to stand in the way of me now having to cover the area where their mom was. How was that able to be done? Because when the calculation for how much insurance was needed, income replacement was considered. Also, what happened with that is the house got paid off that same year. So there's no mortgage anymore. And all 3 of those kids' college was paid for based off of that, because that was something that was one of her wishes. So those are the types of things that I've personally seen insurance do, which is a factor in changing the equation for the trajectory of a family. And if you don't believe me, there's persons who probably you know, or maybe you don't, maybe I'm talking to a different audience and y'all don't know people who essentially have gone through a pass the plate situation to just bury someone, or persons who've been in a position where I thought something was something and then you find out that it's not. One of the worst situations I have experienced is I had someone call me, and essentially she was a recent widow and she believed that her husband, he had coverage. Well, the fact of the matter is, past tense, he had. And guess what happened? That policy lapsed 2 years before he passed away. So there was no insurance in place. So when I go back to talking about that get organized, that's not just for the people who are starting off in life, in their careers. This is something that you should be doing all the time. So that way you make sure you know what something is and the documentation matches. So one of the factors that does play a role in insurance is how much am I willing to pay? So the price of life insurance depends on 4 main factors: your age, your health, because one of the things they take into consideration is this is risk for the insurance company. So they want to know, hey, we're not about to say we're going to insure this person for $1 million and they pass away and they about to be out of here in 2 weeks. We need to make sure, see if there are any risk associated with that. Also, the type of policy and how much coverage you buy. So it ranges and it changes. That's why it's important to, once again, sit down and have an evaluation done to make sure the policy you have, A, fits the needs, fits your objectives, and also fits the what if in life. Sounds a little similar to investing almost, right? Kind of, sort of. What type of coverage do I need based on my needs? As I mentioned, life insurance varies, needs vary based off different stages in life. So Danica, are you telling me I might need more than one policy later? Yes, for different needs. Like I mentioned earlier, me becomes we. I have a baby, 1, 2, or 3, or then even for persons who are talking about estate planning. We have conversations with clients now where in this conversation about estate planning, there's something called taxes. They know that if there's a possibility of them passing, there's going to also possibly be a mortgage still left on the house. So they want to make sure that that house is able to move over and the beneficiaries and the persons who are going to be inheriting it have the funds that will be able to keep it in the house. One of the conversations we have is keeping Big Mama house. So one of the factors that we find is inability for those who have inherited to continue the mortgage, pay taxes, or even just keep things up regarding the home. So as I mentioned before, and because of time, we're not going to go through all of them, there's several different types of life insurance policies. So whether it's term, whole life, blended policies, universal guaranteed, index, and variable universal life, the gamut just runs diverse. The important thing though is what is going to be the best policy for you. So this now leads me into a point that Kendra made earlier as it relates to social media. Kendra, how often do we probably get a call or an email about, hey, I saw something about an index universal life or an IUL on TikTok, Instagram Institute, or Facebook University? We probably hear from somebody. How often?
Pretty often.
Right. So one of the first questions I ask, because they're like, oh, the person showed this, they showed this, they showed that. I ask them, well, how much premium are they paying a month? Also, what was the face amount of the policy? What was the rating that they got? Because no matter what the amount of the policy is, you have to go through something called underwriting. And that's based off of your health. So as I said before, it's important to make sure that you're aligning even your life insurance needs with what your goals and objectives are to make sure you have the right policy that's going to be best for you and not necessarily just chasing something because it seems to be popular or you keep hearing about it. The next type of thing to consider is disability income insurance, which I would say is something that's the most often overlooked. Most of you all probably like, oh yeah, I got that through my job too. Short-term, long-term disability. Well, how does it actually work? And most people be like, I really don't know because no one talks about it that much. Well, let me tell you what it is. So disability income insurance is based off of your occupation. And essentially this is a policy that would pay you your income in the event that you became ill, injured, or had some type of procedure that would prevent you from doing the duties of your job. So no, not stubbing your pinky toe on your way out the door this morning counts as, oh, I'm disabled because I hurt my toe real bad. No, we're talking about things that would prevent you from doing the duties of your job. And one of the things that we find is oftentimes people just equate a disability with wheelchair. They think, okay, you have to be in a wheelchair. I'll tell you now, that's not the case. And as this chart mentions here, it gives a diverse account for how the percentage of different claims that are made. Mental and nervous disorder and substance abuse is at 18%. Injuries only make up 7% of claims. And as you see, nervous system, cancer, the gamut goes on. It all goes back to my inability to perform the duties of my job. So when we're having conversations with persons about navigating their financial journey, one of the blind spots we often see is about disability income insurance. Understanding, once again, what you have through your job. Most employers are not covering you 100%. And then some person will tell me, well, my employer pays for it. Let me let you in on a little secret. Most employers, when they pay the premium, that's 60% or 70%. It's actually reduced by taxes when it gets paid out to you. So my question for you is, if you have 100% of your expenses and now all of a sudden you're collecting 60% of your check, how are you going to make up the difference? Oh, Danica, I got the answer. That emergency fund, sis. I was listening earlier. Well, who's to say that this illness, injury is going to last 3 months, 6 months, or if you've been, extremely diligent, a year? Sometimes things last longer. Okay. Well, I'll go to the bank. Well, without proof of income and continuously generating income, what bank is going to give you a loan? And so these are things to consider when you're looking at navigating how am I going to essentially be building wealth and what's something that could happen. Unplanned medical event or emergency could be something that wipes somebody out completely. So I always tell people, we get health insurance, we get sick, auto insurance, we get in an accident, life insurance in the event of death. Why would we not protect our greatest asset, which is our ability to produce an income, and leave that up to chance? My mama always says, every time you step out that door and you're able to walk back in one piece, that's a blessing. Because how often do we see accidents and then just life happening? And most persons will say all the time. And sometimes recently, it's been events that's been happening. It's just like, what? How did that happen? This still goes back to planning for the what if and making sure you're evaluating everything you have in order, getting organized and understanding what's what and what's not, because that's very, very important.
All right, so I'm here to talk about folks in their latter years of life, right? We want to talk about legacy and actually enjoying those years after we've decided not to work anymore. So I am here to talk about retirement again. Next slide. So for the folks that are, especially in your 40s, 50s, you see the finish lines a little bit closer. How do you envision your retirement? I know I mentioned earlier, a lot of folks say, I don't even see it. This is something that's not going to happen for me. Well, if we get started, maybe we can, get you on track to be able to retire. It may not be 65, but you don't have to be 80, 85 trying to check somebody out at Walmart. So when we talk about retirement, we do ask people, how do you want to live in retirement? Do you want to be the person that's on a cruise quarterly? You want to travel the world? Or are you someone that's like, you know what? I've worked. I'm not really trying to do all that. I just want to sit at home and watch Price is Right. I'll watch the grandkids. So, between that large spectrum of what you can do in retirement, you want to think about that because, although, as Danica said, we have our bucket of money, you're not going to be able to hoard it. You're still going to have costs. You need to be aware of what your costs are going to be and make sure that you have enough. So if after we done threw you a retirement party and we done boots on the ground, we don't want to see you at someone else's job, or you got to tiptoe back into your office place 6 months later or a year later because you don't ran out of money. Next slide. And so one of the most known streams of money, streams of income that you get during retirement is Social Security. Now, what is the conversation that we hear every few years about Social Security? As you know, wait, it's going to end. It's going to stop. So one thing that we want to, or one thing that people have been requesting of us is to show them what their income is like without Social Security, right? So that is one way to figure out how stable am I going to be in retirement? Can I afford to live without Social Security? If you're someone that wants to anticipate receiving Social Security, because let's be honest, we deserve it, we've been paying into it. When we retire, I want to get a Social Security check. You're going to be able to have access to a Social Security statement. The earliest that you can start getting Social Security payments is 62. But full retirement age now for folks, I believe, is 67. And then the latest that you can start taking it is 70. One thing that you'll notice on this statement, and this is what you will see, this bar graph is something that you will actually see on that statement. The longer that you wait, the higher your benefit is. So if you are someone that you just can't wait, you got to retire and you hit 62, just know that you are leaving money on the table if you start taking it at 62. And also, once you hit 67 and you are someone that be like, you know what, I don't really need the income, I'm just going to hold off. You can do that until age 70. Next slide. So once you start thinking about retirement, I probably won't go through all these either. I'll pick out some ones that we see. When you're retiring, think about your living expenses. A lot of people, you've had your kids, they're grown, they at the house. You might be married, you might be single, but now you done bought your dream home, you've been living in it, and you might want to downsize, right? You may not want to fork out lawn maintenance, and if the garage broke, the washer broke. Some people want to transition to a condo or get them an apartment, something that fits their needs a little bit better. Also, if you earn a traditional pension, compare those options, right? Make sure that the choice that you make doesn't interfere with the other benefits that you can get in retirement. Because one thing that we want all the streams of income that are owed to us once we retire. And lastly, one thing to note, something called a required minimum distribution. Now, this is something that you will not be able to avoid. Right now, at the age of 73, if you have a retirement account that you're not pulling money from, or if you're only pulling a little bit of money when needed, once you hit 73, you have to take a minimum amount. And that is calculated based off the account value, based on, we're in 2026. So if you're 73 this year, they're going to base that amount off of December 31st, 2025 times a particular rate based on your age. So there is no avoiding that. I know people like, how you gonna tell me I need to take some money? Well, Uncle Sam is gonna be waiting at the door when you turn 75. They're gonna send a letter out to you before you turn 73 to let you know that you have to start taking this money. And if you think you're not gonna take that money and not deal with the penalty, sorry to tell you, there's a 25% penalty on top of your required minimum distribution that you will be assessed if you are not taking that money. So I know it's like, that's crazy. You know how the IRS is, they want their money and they're going to take it. So be mindful of that. So, as mentioned, I did get a degree in taxation. It was not fun because, in general, taxes are not fun. But one thing that you need to know, there are different ways to be tax smart with your money. There are 3 buckets here. The first one is taxable. So this is an account, if you have, I'll say, an account that is not a retirement account. So if it's an account with just your name on it, or it has your name and someone else's name on there, that's usually a taxable account. Some people may call it a brokerage account. Now, with that account, it is taxable as soon as you start making money off of it. So I talked about it a little bit earlier about how when you put your money in the market and you want it to grow. Now, as soon as it grows, that growth that you're seeing, you have to pay taxes on that in the year that is made. So if I put $1 into an investment account and it grew to $5 by the end of the year, I have to pay taxes on the $4 that I made. Okay. Next is tax deferred. This is something that we are pretty familiar with, right? These are retirement accounts. These are the IRAs, the 401ks, the TSPs, and so on. One thing they tell us about these retirement accounts, we put money into it and it is allowed to grow tax free. So, where do the taxes come in? Once I'm in retirement age and I start taking from these accounts, that is when I pay taxes. I am paying taxes on the money that I'm taking out once I hit retirement age. The last bucket is probably your ears are probably perked up to hear how can I avoid the taxes? Where are my tax-free options? And what we have is the Roth IRA, and you'll see the Roth 401k option in a lot of you all's employers. You'll see that Roth 401k option. Now I'm going to start with the Roth IRA because, of course, there's some stipulations, right? They're not just going to let you take money tax-free. If you open a Roth IRA, in order to be able to take money tax-free, you have to have owned it at least 5 years. Okay, you also, I forgot to mention this, you can take money penalty free from your retirement accounts after 59 and a half. If you take money before that age, you will be assessed a penalty, a 10% penalty on top of the taxes that you have to pay. Of course, there are some different exceptions for that rule, but we won't go into that due to time. Now, with an a Roth IRA, you also have to know that there are income limits. If you are single, I believe it's 160,000. Don't quote me on that. But if you make more than 160,000, you cannot contribute to a Roth IRA, right? Now, are there ways to get around it? Of course, there are things called Roth conversions, but that means if you convert money to a Roth, you have to pay taxes once you do that conversion. Now, you say, Kendra, you said I can have a Roth 401k through my employer. What if I already make above these limitations? Do not have to worry about that because it's through your employer. So do not have to worry about that income restriction. And so I also want to cover the retirement expenses. I talked about this a little bit earlier, being mindful about the money that goes out. One thing you'll see in this chart is there's a particular cost that is going up the older you get. And one of those costs is your healthcare expenses. I know people thinking, I have Medicare, and when I turn 65, I don't have to worry about that. Well, not quite, right? Because when you get older, you still got to pay that premium, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But you will be going to the doctor a little bit more, right? Like I mentioned earlier, I'm in my 30s. My knees are already starting to creak a little bit. Your shoulder hurt. We have people that love to fall. I got a couple of relatives that love to fall, and then it hurt hip, back, elbow, everything. And so you have to be aware that just because I'm done working and there are certain obstacles I don't have to deal with anymore, there's going to be new obstacles once we hit retirement. Next slide. And so, as I mentioned, Medicare. Now, with that, let me make sure I have the costs ready. So when you have Medicare, let me back it up because I see these numbers and I want to make sure I say that. In 2023, a person at the age of 65, a single person at 65, would need $157,500 saved to cover healthcare expenses. And if you're a couple, it's $315,000. Raise your hand. I know you're in your room by yourself. Raise your hand if you can cover that. Not a lot of people can say, yes, I can. And so we have to be aware that we need to have money set aside for our healthcare costs. Now, with Medicare, the Part B, you have to pay $185. And now, of course, you can just have B, but there are other plans that you would need to also enroll in to make sure that you're fully covered. And the cost for those, they are dependent on what you choose. Some common ones are F, G, and N. So make sure you do some research on the different types of plans and the costs associated with that once you get ready to turn 65. And you'll, of course, get more information the closer you get to 65. Next slide.
So, one of the things we often want to talk about is everyone talks about the racial wealth gap. Well, you shouldn't be shocked that there's actually a racial retirement wealth gap, given the statistics Kendra showed earlier regarding African Americans starting to save later and needing to work longer. And what we're finding is sometimes people focus so much to the age. They'll be like, okay, I got to be a minimum of age 55 and have 25 or 30 years of service, and then I can leave this job. Well, guess what? You focus to the number of the age and the year, but the better number to be focusing on is the money I've accumulated going to be enough? And for most persons, one thing that should be your priority concern is I don't want to run out of money before I run out of life. Because the worst thing that could happen is you get in your retirement years and essentially you didn't account for these expenses. As Kendra mentioned, there's always going to be cost. I talked to my mom. She's retired from the Department of Defense almost over 10 years ago. And I always talk, when I talk to her on the phone every week, I'm like, dang, it seems like you always going to a doctor's appointment. And she said, well, keep on living, right? But guess what? Be prepared for those costs as well. So making sure that the money that you have accumulated, that money not only is not going to run out or run to zero, but also making sure you've come up with solutions and strategies to make sure, once again, you do not outlive the money that you've accumulated. But one of the things that we found is more persons, and I would like to say, are more dependent on Social Security versus the other type of retirement accounts. Social Security, for most of us, should be something that's seen as in addition to my 401k, in addition to my 403b, my TSP, my 457, etc. This is something that should be intentional. However, an op-ed that was written for the NAACP said older African Americans with lower lifetime earnings and fewer pension benefits are dependent upon Social Security. In 2017, 35% of married older African Americans and 58% of unmarried African Americans received 90% or more of their income straight from Social Security. This is something that we want to make sure we're preventing. Social Security could be a supplement. Danica, how is that so? Well, remember we talked about retirement planning. It's not just about the money you accumulated. What's the strategy that you and your advisor have worked out as it relates to A, balancing the tax circumstance? Because if you had all your money in one of those taxable accounts, guess what? Every time you hit that account, you got to hit up Uncle Sam, and most people don't like that idea either. One of the most current calls we get from persons who are retired is, my biggest concern is, why am I paying, it seems, either the same amount or more taxes while I'm retired? And there's got to be a better way or another path forward. Another thing that we talk to clients about is, once again, the ability, as Kendra mentioned, to delay taking Social Security. So, for example, my father's going to be turning 65 in June this year. He's not taking Social Security until he's 67, 68 years old. Why? Because remember we talked about diversification earlier? It's just not applicable to just your investments. It's also part of your retirement investment strategy. So if you have more than one bucket, as she showed earlier, to pull from, you don't necessarily have to go pull the Social Security bucket right away. That's where coming in with a strategy looks like. So versus I'm just going to take the money here, take the money there, when most persons feel a level of comfort and certainty with knowing I'm comfortable with knowing that what I have is enough. Because oftentimes persons will show me a statement and it has 6 figures in it. And then we start running the money based off of these expected costs or unexpected medical costs. And they're like, whoa, X amount of my saved income is now going to be going towards these things. Or for some of us, life transitions and happens. Some of us were empty nesters, and guess what? People came back and lived in your house. Them kids that you were like, go on, go live your life. Life happens, and sometimes it's always good to come back to mama and daddy's house. But with them coming back, all of a sudden, don't get me started on the Dominion bill, all right? Dominion bill went up. Y'all fussing at the kids, grandkids, turn them lights off, stop running that water so long, all that type of stuff, because the water bill, Dominion bill, gas bill, all goes up, electric bill, all of those things. Those are unforeseen costs, but were you able to plan for them? So this is something that we take very seriously, because at the end of the day, we want our clients to be able to be thriving and not just surviving in retirement. So what is something on your highway to retirement that could defer you from or deter you from where you're trying to reach as your final destination? An unfinanced and an unplanned long-term care event. Danica, we already talked about that. No. Long-term care and long-term disability are two different things. Long-term disability is related to your occupation and is only during your working years. And long-term care, in that event, can happen at any time in your life. But most often we start having this conversation with persons in their 40s. Well, why is that? Reason is more than half of Americans turning 65 today, which by the way, every day 10,000 baby boomers are turning age 65. So that gives you an idea of how many persons will need some type of long-term care services and support. The average cost of those services and support is $120,900 in today's dollars. So when we're having this conversation with persons, it's very important that we essentially, you all are having the discussion amongst yourself, you with your spouse, and even with your kids. Me and Kendra have been in way too many meetings where persons will tell us, oh, I don't need long-term care. My long-term care plan is my children. And I'd be like, do your kids know that? And most of them like, no, but because I had to take care of my parents, they got to take care of me. Well, guess what? There's some factors that are making things a little bit different for a person's ability to care. One of the things, and when I say care, not like care about you, but care from the position of becoming a caretaker. So for example, if you live in Virginia, your children live in California, my question is, are them and their family moving back to Virginia, or are you moving to California? Also, have you had a conversation with them on how they're going to be balancing their mortgage, school for their kids, repaying their student loans, and taking care of you? And most people be like, I don't really think about it like that. So what we're finding is, unfortunately, most persons are having to figure this out, when essentially you can be in a position today where you can start planning and having the conversation. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but I tell you what is most uncomfortable, and persons who have been caregivers, they understand this. It is not just a financial weight. There is a mental weight, a physical weight that plays on you when you adopt this role. A better question or consideration I have for persons who say, my child will, is recognizing what are the things that qualify for a long-term care event. You're unable to perform 2 out of the 6 daily living activities. I can't bathe myself. I can't feed myself. I can't control my continence going to the toilet. I can't dress myself. I need assistance as it relates to getting in and out of the bed. So those are just some of the things. Or maybe I'm starting to experience early onset dementia or Alzheimer's. These are all things that would be a triggered long-term care event. So another thing that we hear from persons is, I'll just pay for it out of pocket because I have these investment accounts, I'm diversified. Well, let's have a conversation as it relates to cost. Most people don't have the idea how much it even costs. So what we prepared here at the bottom of this slide is an average of care today and the care in 2035. In-home care, because that's what most persons and studies show, people live longer when they're able to age in place versus having to go to a facility. And if you're in-home care and it's a non-medical caregiver, average cost is $6,673 today. Cost in 2035, $8,966. Let's say you get a private duty nurse, like a home health care aide who's also has a medical background. That could be an average of $390 a day And in 2035, that'll be $524 a day. Some people look into community and assisted living. Adult day healthcare is about $1,750. What's the cost in 2035? We're looking at $2,352 a month. I moved to an assisted living community, $6,525. 2035, $8,769. Nursing home. Let's say I'm okay with having a roommate. Average annual cost, cost a month. Let me get into the numbers. $9,733. Estimated cost 2035, $13,080. And if you're like, I need a space by myself, that would be $11,178. And then 2035, you're looking at $15,000. So when we're having conversations about what are some ways or things that would happen that would offset my retirement savings and essentially put me in a position where I'd be running through my money fast, a long-term care event. And because people are living longer and medical advancements, it's not like it used to be years ago where maybe it was 2 to 3 years where someone's on claim. There's persons who are living longer, even going through these daily living activity inability to perform for themselves, or even with early onset dementia and Alzheimer's. So these are real conversations, and these are things that essentially could put you in a position where you, unfortunately, and not to your knowledge, even disinherit your heirs because you have to spend down essentially what you meant to leave for them. But there's a solution. There's always solutions. So one of the things I'm going to pop up and say is Kendra mentioned Medicare earlier. One big misconception is Medicare covers long-term care costs. It does not. Medicare will cover while you're in the hospital, but once you go back home, it does not cover that. So some options will be looking at standalone traditional policies. Most people know those are the use it or lose it policies, where, hey, I had to have this event and I lived a long life and went on to glory at 120 years old. Yes, similar to car insurance, you never got in an accident, but you paid premiums and there was nothing on the other side. So I have listed here some of the pros and cons about that. Use it or lose it, lower premiums, premium increases, and also one of the things is there is no death benefit. However, carriers have gotten very strategic. You might see long-term care life insurance hybrids or long-term care annuity hybrids where they've now opened up the offerings as relates to how people can fund and finance their long-term care. So there is no lose policy, no premium increases. And let's say you had an event where it's like, hey, I don't want this anymore. You're able to consider, you can surrender the policy, and most of them have a death benefit chassis attached to it. That is why it's important to meet with a professional. So even when you're doing your retirement and later life planning, making sure that you've also accounted for what will be my long-term care strategy in the event that I need it. Because what I will tell you is there are 3 types of plans. I have a standalone policy, I have a hybrid, or I have no plan. And the worst position to be in is no plan, and then trying to scramble and figure out now, how am I going to take care of myself, or how will my family be able to support me? And one thing I will say is one of the hardest part is for some of our clients who are our age, I'm 37 years old, is having this conversation with their parents. Because they're like, oh, as soon as I bring it up, they're like, I don't want to talk about it, or it's taken care of. Parents, please talk to your children about your wishes and what you'd like to have done while you are still in a position of competency and understanding. There's a little thing that they used to have said, be kind to your children. They select your nursing home. Well, how about this? Let's have a conversation so I make sure that in my latter years, I'm able to enjoy them with dignity and not in a position where it's causing more chaos, confusion, and infighting in my family because we didn't properly plan. But I might not be talking to y'all, and y'all don't know people like that. I might be talking about somebody in another state. Now, planning for those latter years. The biggest piece of this is talking about estate planning. And I know there's been some conversations about this. But before I get into this headline, the other headline I want to talk about in the statistics is the greatest wealth transfer taking place in history. We're currently in the middle of it right now. Greatest wealth transfer is set to transpire over the next 2 decades, where baby boomers and the silent generation will transfer an estimated of $124 trillion in assets to younger generations. What generations are those? Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z through 2048. However, in conjunction with that article, here's another one that says Black Americans are losing out on an estimated $68 trillion in wealth transfer, and estate planning can change that. Why is this something that's important? Because as we have this conversation about leaving a legacy and all of those things, proper planning is necessary. Me and Kendra have been talking and we've done some collaborative things, and people will talk to us and share stories about homes and no wills and all these things. But guess what? It's important to have the conversation and start planning today. So what are some key things you can do to start your estate planning process? Getting a will or a trust in order. And some people will ask us, well, which one do I need, a will or a trust? I will tell you, consult with an estate planning attorney, because each of them has their own pros and their own cons, and they operate completely different. For example, if someone dies with only a will, probate is required. And guess what? That's public record. So y'all might not know people like this, but we might see stories sometimes in the news or hear about it from somebody else about all of a sudden someone passes away and you got somebody claiming to be related to you at a funeral that you ain't never seen before, or people pop up saying, oh, she told me that I could have that fur, or they said that I could have that house. And guess what they have the right to do? Contest. And you find yourself in a position where guess what? Now you're having to go through probate. So probate means the courts can get involved. And probate isn't a quick process. We were doing a workshop not too long ago, and a woman shared with us that she's still currently in probate from a death that happened with a family member over a year ago. And guess what? You can either choose to represent yourself or you're going to hire an attorney, and that costs money. Another thing that happens is while something is in probate, the accounts are frozen. So even if you think that you have claim to that house and that money in that bank account to help pay stuff, you can't get to it. So this caused delays and there's costs associated with it. So it's important to make sure essentially that all your house is in order, literally and figuratively, and making sure that the will was the best way to go or the route in regards to how you do your estate planning. And I'm not going to say that it's not, because we also have clients where there's both things in play. What's the other? A trust. A trust does not go through probate, and it's a private process and not a matter of public record. A trustee takes over the account immediately, bills are able to be paid immediately, and distributions are able to be made, because guess what? It's all been written out, and it's also something that can't be contested. Now, what I will say also in conjunction with this is as we're getting organized, remember I said get organized happens all the way through your life, making sure that adjustments are made. And what does that mean? Guess what? Sometimes persons, they have people named as beneficiaries who are no longer with us. So that now adds another layer to everything. Or maybe there's been some changes in the dynamics of your family. One thing I will share, because people ask like, well, hold on, like, so do I have to get a will or a trust for my like insurance policy or my investments account? No, because those actually name beneficiaries, and those are considered legal documents. But what I will say, going back to getting organized, making sure that those accounts are updated. Another horror story. What if in the event of someone passing, you find out that on that insurance policy, the ex-wife or ex-spouse is named as the beneficiary and not you? Or, oh, they meant to change this thing and never got around to it. These are real life scenarios that really happen. And essentially, one of the other things that people take for granted is time. I'll get to it. I'll get to it. It's on my list of things to do. Or as me and Kendra do, we'll do these webinars. People say, I've been meaning to get with you. Don't delay, get it done today. Because essentially what's in place now is going to be what people have to deal with. And then as it relates to the ability to transfer wealth, this is one of the things that's standing in our way as a people, as being able to do that. So, along with the wealth transfer, it should be noted that not everything is going to people's heirs. It's projected that $18 trillion it will be going to charities. So that's also a way, because sometimes we have clients who say, hey, I don't have children, or I don't have persons connected to me who I would want to leave things to, but there's some organizations that I'm really, I care about. Is there a way that I could, leave things to them? And the answer is yes. So what are some of those organizations? Some of you all, you went to a particular university, and I'm sure you all will shout out your university in the chat, so we see the Behold and the Real HU, all that type stuff, so y'all can do y'all thing over there. But guess what? One of the things that persons do is they leave money to their university. They also leave money to their churches and causes that they care about, like United Negro College Fund or the Susan G. Komen Fund, and research funds for various things. So these are opportunities to give and leave a long-lasting legacy. Every once in a while, people will see, like, this university got a large donation. And some people say, like, wait, how did that happen? Well, guess what? That was maybe part of their estate plan, and they allocated what percentage of their assets they want to go towards that. And with estate planning and looking at charitable giving as a path forward, there's even benefits to you as it relates to taxes. And so those are things that we explore to clients as it relates to what are some other opportunities in which I can leave a legacy in conjunction with what I want to leave to my beneficiaries. So who can receive charitable donations? As I mentioned earlier, charities, nonprofit organizations, schools, colleges, universities, and institutions, churches, temples, or mosques, and even hospitals. So when you're outlining essentially who do I want to leave something to, it doesn't necessarily always just have to be your family. Sometimes people consider the greater picture of their community. So you might say, Danica, this is a lot, but guess what? This is one of the things that people do as it relates to a compromise. I don't like the word sacrifice. And some persons might use the terminology of planting seeds for shade trees you may never sit under. Someone keeping something, an institution in mind, because that's something that we can do. And essentially we see it far too often where some of our beloved organizations and universities and institutions, due to a lack of funding, they're unable to continue the work that we were either a benefactor of or even our community.
And so as we wrap up, I know me and Danica, we get really excited about these subjects and we can be some yappers. And I know it's getting late. So as we wrap up, one thing that we wanted to highlight is that you don't have to do it alone. You can build a team. So that includes your financial planner, an insurance professional, which me and Danica can cover both of those because we're independent. We are able to do insurance as well. But two of the things that we cannot do, although I have my degree in taxation, I am not an accountant, I am not a CPA. So certain tax questions, you would have to be referred to a CPA, as well as getting an estate attorney. Danica and I, we can handle the assets that go into a trust, but we cannot draw any of the legal documents needed to be able to create a trust in or a will. And lastly, when we talk about financial planning, which is a holistic process that Danica and I like to work with clients under, and we want to make sure that it's not just the insurance or the investments. We can handle all the things that are a part of the financial planning process, which includes the estate planning, retirement planning, tax planning, wealth accumulation, which is the investments, risk management, which is the houses, the insurance, as well as your financial positioning, which includes that cash flow and debt management. So this is our information. If you want to contact us, this is where you can reach out to us. Also, for the folks that are on the webinar, we are offering a 45-minute to an hour no obligation session at no cost. So make sure that you leave your emails and your first and last name, of course, and they can get your information to us and we can reach out to you to get the no obligation session scheduled. And I know there are quite a few questions in the chat I don't know how we want to, I can look through them.
Yes, I will start from
Okay.
the live questions from the chat. First of all, thank you both so much for such an informative session. Of course, I think your slides were perfect for our audience this evening, so we thank you so, so much. So we did have a couple of questions. I would start with, how do you decide whether to do pre-tax or after-tax 401k contribution?
So I think that was for me. So if you have a Roth component in your 401k, of course, as I mentioned, those benefits are that you are able to take those distributions tax free. So it depends on if you want to pay taxes on the front end or the back end. So for the regular 401k, the pre-tax, again, you're paying taxes at distribution. One thing I will say, once you retire, you would think that you're at a lower tax bracket. So when you're in your retirement years versus being in your working years, because right, you're not having that regular income that you had. Now we're relying on our retirement, our streams of retirement income. So basically it's based off of when you want to pay taxes and where you're at in that tax bracket wise.
Thank you so much for that. And I know we had a couple of other questions in the chat, but in the interest of time, we will have them reach back out to the audience with the answers to their questions. And make sure that you fill out that feedback survey, because that is how you can have your no obligation session with First Genesis of Virginia. So I wanted to say thank you so much to Ms. Royster and Ms. Bullock for your time this evening. And before we close out, I do have a few announcements for our audience. So, what are the Suffolk Deltas up to? Next slide, please. So tonight's webinar is one of many financial fortitude workshops our chapter has hosted. So to watch previous sessions and stay informed about future financial empowerment opportunities and workshop series, be sure to follow us at SACDST 1964. Next slide. So we also invite everyone watching to join us this Friday for our Deltas Getting Fit and Fabulous Zumba fitness and line dancing event. The event will take place on Friday, May the 8th from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. at Creekside Elementary School and is open to the public. Registration is just $10 and space is limited. So please, we encourage you all to register early using the QR code on the flyer. And whether you're a beginner or you're more experienced, I'm sure that you will have a great time. And we hope that you come out for an evening of fitness, fellowship, and fun as we continue promoting healthy lifestyles within our community. And in partnership with Good Health Wins, we also encourage everyone to access and share the 2025-2026 respiratory season resource guides. These resources help provide important health information and tools to keep our families and communities informed during respiratory illness season. It may be getting to 80 degrees, but I promise you, it's still out there. Next slide. We really, really, really need everyone's support as the Suffolk Alumni Chapter participates in the Cooper Hurley Injury Lawyers Vote for a Cause campaign. We encourage everyone to vote to help us continue doing the hard work throughout our community for a chance to receive additional funding to support our programs and initiatives. So if you've already voted, please continue to share with everyone in your network. Next slide. The Suffolk Alumni Chapter is currently hosting the Power of 22 virtual food drive. Chapter members, family, and friends are encouraged to donate $22 or more to help support the Suffolk Christian Fellowship Center and its efforts to address food insecurity within our community. If you were at our May Week program on Saturday, they were recognized as our Community Organization of the Year, and we want to have as much of a showing as we can for their organization. So all of the proceeds from the virtual food drive will benefit the organization directly, and we encourage everyone to participate and continue to share the initiative with others. fast forward to June the 20th, we invite everyone to attend the Royal Heat Day Party hosted by the Suffolk Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and the Alpha Iota Chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, also known as the Peanut City Qs. Join us on Saturday, June the 20th from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Baxter Sports Lounge in downtown Norfolk for an evening of music, fellowship, and fun as we turn up the royal heat in downtown Norfolk. The event is open to the public, so mark your calendars. Tickets are selling fast, so please be sure to purchase your tickets and tell a friend. And finally, be sure to stay connected with the Suffolk Alumni Chapter by following us on social media at SACDST 1964, and be sure to like, share, and also comment as well. And visit www.suffolkdst.org for more information on chapter events, programs, and community initiatives like that one that we had tonight. Thank you again to Ms. Royster and Ms. Bullock for joining us this evening, and thank you to everyone who tuned in and participated in tonight's webinar. We hope tonight's discussion was informative, encouraging, and empowering. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you so much for coming.